Well, folks, you're getting something. I'm not sure what, but it's something.
You don't have to be poor anymore. Jesus is here.
The loudspeaker spoke up and said, Christianity is stupid.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, not far from the redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts is curled up in my arms, demanding attention. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cat. Get over it. This is a news episode, and yes, America will be joining us. As you can no doubt tell, I am a little under the weather. I have a nasty case of con crud. Whenever you go to a large group, there's always a chance you'll pick up something because everybody's got all their diseases and they all bump into one another, rub up against one another, and turn into something more virulent than they were before. So, Tuesday, I woke up feeling a little shabby. Wednesday morning, however, I woke up and I'm like, I am not going to work. So I laid out on Wednesday and Thursday, and because of the screwy shit that we have at work, I have no idea if I'm getting sick pay for those days or not, because they've changed the policy and nobody really understands it. Well, actually, they changed the policy, and then they changed it back, and then because they made some changes when they changed it back, nobody knows. It's one of those things that goes round and round, and I'll know when I see my paycheck if I got sick pay for those days I missed. I hope so, but you never know. And I am still not over it. I'm living in this weird drug-induced haze. I would have stayed out on Friday, but if you miss more than 3 days of work, well, if you miss more than 2 days of work, you have to have a doctor's note. It's a 45-minute walk to the doctor. $50 to see the doctor, just to say, yeah, you got a virus, not much we can do for you. Here's your note, so they won't write you up at work. So I went to work on Friday, and I need to thank Joe Kendick for being nice enough to come by on his lunch break and pick me up and take me to work. He works third shift, so his lunch break was a little earlier than when I would have to be at work, but not earlier than when I have to get up. So I got up and he took me to work, and then I managed to get a ride home so I didn't have to walk. Tomorrow I will not be so lucky. Oh, boy. And, I bought myself some off-brand NyQuil to act as a palliative because, the shit knocks your ass out and you sleep, and at least during that time you're not suffering. Well, this off-brand NyQuil doesn't have alcohol in it, so you don't sleep. So, I haven't had a normal 8 hours night sleep since Tuesday. The days I was off, and yesterday I just slept off and on all day long. And a lot of times it was just I was laying in bed and didn't want to move. And I'm in this weird haze where I babble on, as you can tell. But America and I did manage to record an episode, and I need to thank her because she put together the episode. So if you don't like the stories, blame her, don't blame me. Although she did a good job. In fact, she picked one story that I most especially wanted to cover that if I had been picking the stories, I absolutely would have taken. So I'd say she's certainly got a good handle on things. So I'm going to do my best to edit this episode and put it together in a nice, neat little package, but I hope you can understand if it's a little rough around the edges here and there, because I barely know what's going on. Hopefully when I wake up in the morning, I'll be clear-headed, and I'll be feeling better. I should be. I don't feel quite as bad today as I have the past couple of days, so that's something. And now with that, we'll get to the news. Oh, but before that, one thing that just popped into my head. See, folks, I told you I'm just kind of drifting in and out of consciousness and don't know much of anything. I do have the first Patreon episode recorded. I haven't edited it, and I'll be honest, I was like 2 o'clock in the morning when I recorded it, because I couldn't sleep, and I was like, well, let me cut this. So I don't know what it's about. And I may, after listening to it when I go to edit it, may decide I don't want to post it at all. But assuming everything's okay with it, and I'm not too worn out, I will have that up sometime this week, and I will have another one up sometime this week as well, since I owe you guys 2 this month. All right. I think that's it. So we'll get to the news.
Have I helped your unbelief?
Oh, yes. Yes, I believe. I believe in death. I believe in disease. I believe in injustice and inhumanity and torture and anger and hate. I believe in murder. I believe in pain. I believe in cruelty and infidelity. I believe in slime and stink, and in every crawling, putrid thing, every possible ugliness and corruption, you son of a bitch! I believe! In you.
Our first story is about Pope Francis von Asshole, who asks for forgiveness for the church's role in the Rwandan genocide. I knew a bit about the Rwandan genocide. I knew why it happened. So if you don't know, basically between April and June of 1994, 800,000 ethnic Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed by Hutu extremists in a wave of violence that was sparked by the president, who was a Hutu, his death. His plane was shot down. So then violence spreads across the country, and it's what it sounds like. It is now, ethnic cleansing. And the church's role in this was incredibly horrific. There were priests and nuns who were killed, but there were also priests and nuns that were killing others and, giving people up to be killed. There was a priest that was writing a list of people to be killed and women to be raped. There was a priest that sheltered several thousand people within his church and then ordered it to be bulldozed while they were still inside. And then once all of this is said and done and, the dust clears, Catholic church organizations are scrambling to get some of these people out of the country. And then they never face justice for it. And Pope Francis and the Vatican just sort of give this, platitudes, I guess. He says the sins and failings of the church and its members had disfigured the face of Catholicism. And they acknowledged that some people succumbed to hatred and violence by participating in the genocide, and asked for forgiveness. And that's not a thing you ever get forgiveness for. I don't think you can. I don't think you should. And this is perhaps the biggest thing that a lot of people have with religion. In their world, your priest could give you forgiveness for your participation in the Rwandan genocide, and then you go to heaven. And if, say, you were a Catholic and you lost your faith because of the Rwandan genocide, you then go to hell. And I know people have a problem with the idea of infinite torture for a finite crime, but I feel like this is an infinite torture kind of thing. And I just can't imagine forming my mouth to ask for forgiveness for the participation in the slaughter of 800,000 people because they were a different ethnicity. So that's just the Pope and the Catholic Church continuing to be assholes.
Yes, and, it's things like this that always, pop into my head when people talk about, oh, well, Islam's the most violent religion, blah, blah, blah. And, they're all violent. It flares up in one religion or another at different times.
Right.
And, are you, you're just as dead from a terrorist attack as you are from, being killed because your parents wouldn't take you to the doctor because they believed in prayer. It's just one makes the news because there's usually a big sexy explosion, whereas the other is just some kid dying quietly at home alone. Right, and then it's numbers. Yeah. I mean, if we allowed gay conversion camps and suddenly, 70 teenagers are killed in a gay conversion camp, is Islam still the more violent religion, or is it that we just, as Western Americans, we don't want to think about the horrors and atrocities of our own countrymen? Yeah. When you try and shoot up a Planned Parenthood, is that less violent than suicide bombers? I just don't. Yeah. We all have our cultural blinders, so things that happen seem in our society seem normal, so we don't give them as much weight as something that happens in someone else's society. Right. But yeah, and it only took the Pope a couple of months to offer the apology after he was asked to give it. And really, I don't, that's sort of like one of those things that why would you need to ask for, I would think it would be one of those things that as soon as it came to light that members of your church participated in a genocide, you would be like, no, that's wrong. We do not, support this in any way, and we're sorry that this happened to anyone. Right. If I have to ask for an apology, it's not really an apology. Yeah.
Oh, fellow members of the Roman Senate, hear me. Shall we continue to build palace after palace for the rich, or shall we aspire to a more noble purpose and build decent housing for the poor? How does the Senate vote? Fuck the poor! Good.
Next story is from the BBC. Guyana's transgender activists fight archaic law. As a transgender woman living in Guyana, Petronella Trotman has grown accustomed to violence and daily abuse on the streets. But when she was physically attacked in January while walking in Georgetown, the South American country's capital, she decided to seek justice. The young man came up to me and asked if it was me who disrespected him the other night, she said, in reference to a previous argument with her alleged assailant. And he, Jock, stabbed me to my neck with scissors. I fell to the ground, and when he left, I ran away. Then he came back with some glass bottles and pelted me down. It happens a lot here in Guyana to transgender women, she added. We live in a very homophobic society. And, of course, she decided, well, I'm going to report this to the cops. And when the case went to the judge says, we've got a problem here because you're going to dress like a woman, and that's against this 124-year-old law, and I want you to appear as a man in the court. And when she refused, the judge barred her from the court and tossed the case out.
Yeah, because 125-year-old laws are always good things to keep and never reevaluate.
Yeah.
It really... This is about the ick factor, right? Like, that's the only thing this is. This is... And I don't understand, because it's the... Men are men and women are women, on one hand. And then the cries of, like, fucking feminists, right? Like, if you would stop with the toxic gender roles and demands of stereotypes, then you don't have to have the crazy angry feminists on the other side. Our work isn't necessary if you just pull your head out of your ass and get your shit together.
Yeah, and the whole thing of cross-dressing is kind of weird because there is an NPR reporter who, name I think is Sarah Chase, but they, after 9/11, they sent her to Afghanistan to cover the war there. And so she's got to figure out what to wear, right? And she because it's Afghanistan, she realizes that if she goes dressed as a woman, she's got to wear a burqa and all this other stuff. And she's like, I'm not doing that. So she's got the traditional men's clothing for Afghanistan and wore that. And in the interview I heard where they were, asking her how'd that go over, and she said, I don't think they could process it, because she would just walk around and do everything like a normal person would. But she was, she said, I don't think any of them really, they couldn't figure out how to process her. They didn't see her as a woman. They didn't see her as a man. They saw her basically as asexual.
Right. That's a very interesting... Because I'm sure there are a lot... Like, that's probably not even an idea that a lot of people have even thought about. The idea of a woman in men's clothing. Although, they've got to have seen, like, Western women in pantsuits.
Yeah, well...
Maybe. Well, maybe not.
Yeah.
And, wow, that's a very... It is rare that I think of items as, like, men's clothing, especially pants. Even though pants are very much... Like, my grandmother was 70 before she would even consider wearing pants. And even then, she wore, like, pressed slacks all the time. She wasn't going to wear jeans. And so I'm sure if you're not used to perhaps women dressing up as what you see as men's clothing, that's not a wow. I would love to see the like smoke come out of their ears as they just don't know what to do with this situation.
Yeah.
It's like a cat that barks. You're like, well, shit, what do I do now?
Yeah. It's It's the thing that shouldn't exist but does.
Right.
But, yeah, and to get back to the article, what's really infuriating is, what's really infuriating is they dropped the charges because, she wouldn't show up dressed as a man. It's like, come on, forget the whole legality of whether or not she should be able to dress however she wants. She was assaulted. That should take priority over everything else. I mean, regulating.
Well, they said that the reason that it matters to them is what was the judge's actual? So he said that the reason he gave for why it mattered to him is sometimes persons commit offenses dressed as males, and then when they appear in court dressed as a female, it can have implications for how a victim can identify his or her accuser or vice versa. So I'm assuming that means that if you commit a crime as a male, which is probably seen as capable of committing the crime, but if you present as a woman, there's the idea that women are probably less, like, we're less violent, we're less vicious, we're sweet and docile little creatures. So it's a way in which to manipulate the culture's stereotype of gender roles to get an emotional response.
Yeah.
So he probably thinks that, just because I see a woman, if I hear that she's murdered 15 people, I'm less likely to want to convict her. No. You show me evidence a woman killed 15 people, we're putting that bitch under the jail. Like, she's going to all of the jails at once.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's their own issue with gender norms that make this a problem.
Yeah.
They need to come into the 21st century, like 2017, not 1517.
Right. Well, somebody's upset.
No.
Okay, you want to take the next?
I do. So I read the BBC a lot because that's where I get my news station, and I had to, I won't even lie, I had to Google where Belarus was. So I will admit that I didn't know where Belarus was, and I read this story, and I was immediately horrified and angered and upset because I then watched news stories, and, the cops don't give a shit, and they're kicking everybody's ass. So this story is out of Belarus. Hundreds are arrested for defying a ban. Police in Belarus have arrested hundreds of people during protests against a so-called social parasites tax on the underemployed. Thousands defied a ban to protest, taking to the streets of Minsk and other cities. Demonstrators shouted fascists at riot police. There have been weeks of sporadic protests against a $230 or £185 levy on those unemployed for 6 months. The president of the country insists that the tax will not be scrapped. He says it instills discipline in the work shy, though he has suspended it for this year. Opponents say it punishes those who cannot find a job. So basically, people are protesting this tax, as they fucking rightly should. Because if I don't have a job and can't find a job, how do I pay this tax? And they're protesting, even though they're not supposed to be protesting, and I love it. And the police are dragging people by their hair off buses and the elderly, and they are just basically kicking everyone's ass in the streets. It's really rather horrifying.
Yeah, there's an awful lot about the former Soviet republics that nobody talks about. And most people don't even know all the ones that exist. I mean, we all know of Ukraine and a few others, but yeah, there, like Belarus, Kyrgyzstan. I can't even think of all the others now, but there's a whole bunch. A lot of them are, they're dictatorships. So I don't know why they call this one the last dictatorship in Europe. And this guy has been, he's been, until fairly recently, he's been snuggling up to Pooty Poot. And something must have happened for him to decide maybe he doesn't want to be part of that anymore. Because there was talk, I think, I don't know, less than 10 years ago, I think, about them merging back into Russia. And that didn't happen because, like, the eastern half of the country wants to be part with Russia, whereas the western half of the country is, more partial to being with Europe.
Right.
But, yeah, there's... For some reason, we just ignore everything that goes on in that part of the world. Well, we're Americans, so nobody else counts, I guess. But, like, I know Kyrgyzstan is, they're a northern, I mean, they're like Siberia north, fucking cold all year round, everything else. They're going to build an entire city under a dome because they make so much money from gas and oil. And it's going to be it's going to be heated to tropical temperatures all year round.
I'll move there. Tucker, I'll miss you, honey. I'm moving.
Say that now, but I mean, that's ruled by a nutter. We'll see what happens with this. What was I going to say? It was funny. Back in 2001, I was working for a sat phone company. And, we rented out satellite phones to people who were going to be traveling around the world. We also sold them, but bulk of our business was rental. And of course, before, when somebody applied to rent a phone, we had to ask where they planned on using the phone. Because certain phones are illegal in certain parts of the world. So you don't want to send, you don't want to send them a phone that gets confiscated at the border where they get wherever it is they're going and you never see it again. And somebody said they were going to Belarus, and the owner's wife is like, Belarus, that's not a country. And I'm like, yeah, it is. It's part of the former Soviet Union. Well, I've never heard of it. That's because you spent all your time drinking and whoring by your own admission. I didn't say that. But, she was a good Christian woman. And did spend a lot of... I
mean, I feel like Christ... Didn't he hang out with prostitutes?
Yeah.
See?
Prostitutes and married women, according to some accounts. There was, there are, conflicting accounts, but there's claims that, lots of people were upset because there were all these women hanging around him, and, like, all these women left their husbands to go follow Jesus around, and there was, like, this big, huge camp of women that was, like a day, half a day behind him to keep the scandal down, but, people still talked about it. So, I'm thinking if that's all true, and he was real, then the guy must have been hung like a mule.
Goodness. Do you still have this man's information, Tucker?
Afraid not.
Damn it, Tucker, damn it.
Okay.
But you blinded me with silence. She blinded me with silence.
Where's this from?
ScienceDaily.com.
Thank you. Heart tissue grown on spinach leaves. Which really sounds weird, but it's actually pretty cool. Researchers face a fundamental challenge as they seek to scale up human tissue regeneration from small lab samples to full-size tissues, bones, even whole organs to implant in people to treat disease or traumatic injuries. How to establish a vascular system that delivers blood deep into the developing tissue. Current bioengineering techniques, including 3D printing, can't fabricate the branching network of blood vessels down to the capillary scale that are required to deliver the oxygen, nutrients, and essential molecules required for proper tissue growth. Now, I have a question about that because I've seen video. You can find it on the web of, and it's several years old now, where they 3D printed a frog heart. And it beats. Now, maybe because it's it's an amphibian heart, it's not as complicated to do as a human heart would be.
Well, I have a researcher that has been able to grow cells on like sterile surgical mesh. Mm-hmm. And those beat and they're little strips of mesh, and they beat like a heart, but it's got no vasculature. It's just it looks like a piece of mesh, on one side. And so I don't actually know what is making it beat. Maybe it's just the electrical impulses of the muscle, and there's no like blood flowing through it. But he's got a totally synthetic product that beats in time to like a heart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't remember the details on the frog heart, and I'm sure frog heart is not, because theirs is human hearts are 4 valves and frog hearts are 2 valves, if I'm not mistaken. So that would probably that may be it. But anyways, so what they're doing is they're decellularizing plants as perfusable tissue engineering scaffolds. So they basically they get all the cells out of a plant, and you'd think that would get rid of the plant leaf, but it doesn't. And then that forms a framework for which they can implant other cells, and so you get a growth network that is closer to what you would find in human tissue, and then you can make a piece of tissue that has a vascular system needed to give it blood and things like that. It's an interesting solution, and it's definitely worth following up on. But the reason why they need it is because they don't have the resolution on 3D printing small enough to be able to do this, but someday they'll have it that small. But
I'm so excited. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
We're going to 3D print mouse eyeballs. It's going to be great.
Well, be able to do that, and you'll 3D print or grow new organs and things like that. I cannot find that guy's name or anything. I wish I could remember it, but there's a British doctor. He splits his time between the UK and the US, and his goal is pushing things so that death from disease or injury is less of a cause. And he's talking about, okay, you get somebody who is in really bad shape, either due to disease or an accident, and you put them in suspended animation for however long it takes to treat the disease or repair the damage that they have, and then you revive them. I mean, he's talking about if you were in a car accident and your heart was damaged in the car accident, and rather than, and they look at it and they're like, we can't stitch him up, and we don't have time, we can't get a transplant to do anything. they would put you in suspended animation while they grew a new heart.
That would be cool as shit.
Yeah. And he's like, he's pushing all these technologies that exist and that have been proven to, you know, I mean, we're not at the point where we can put somebody in suspended animation for weeks or months or anything like that. But he's, you know, like they found somebody who was in Japan. This is the longest record of somebody who was, you know, quote unquote dead from hypothermia. They were like 24 hours. And they were able to warm them up and bring them back to life with no harm, you know, no permanent damage. And it's like, he's trying to study things like that to figure out what's going on. So, like, one of the things he's pushing for is, chilling units, chilling blankets in ambulances. So if somebody has a heart attack, they put the chilling blanket on you. It cools you down, slows everything down, lessens the amount of damage, and gives them more time to work on you to save you.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if something like this, if they could increase, you know, I mean, if they could get you in a state where, you know, you could be kept there for a month, say, and this allows tissues to be grown in a month's time, or a little less, then, you know, heart failure, all kinds of diseases like that wouldn't mean anything anymore because, you know, they just, if you had a sudden heart attack and it's like, well, there's nothing left of, or, you know, there's no heart, well, just pop them on ice while we grow them a new one, and then we'll stick that in there.
Right. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, and it offers all kinds of potential for, like, the job I had, there was a supervisor who, he'd had some kind of, I don't know, but he'd had some kind of trauma, and they had to remove a large hunk of muscle from his neck. You know, and so he had this weird shape to his neck because, you know, half the muscles in it were gone. Whereas
Right.
something like this, they could grow him a new hunk of muscle and put it back in there.
I wonder why they didn't do a graft. Maybe you can't do a graft of something that big.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was huge. Of course, yeah, with the way our medical system it may be that, you know, the insurance wouldn't cover it and he couldn't afford it out of pocket.
Good point. Because that is a sadly very common.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's times where it's like, I felt really bad, and I'm like, well, you know, they always say you feel really bad, you should go to the doctor, but there's probably nothing the doc can do, and I can't really afford to go, so I'm not going. You know, and one of these days I'm going to be like, well, I'm having chest pains. Could just be indigestion. If I go and I run all these tests and it's nothing, I'm out all kinds of money I don't have.
No, don't even finish that thought, Tucker, because I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way it is. You just look at it and it's like you just, you know, do I risk bankruptcy over nothing, or do I risk bankruptcy over something, or do I die?
Oh my gosh. That makes me so fucking sad. I'd never thought about you dying till right now.
Well, happens to the best of us.
What the hell am I supposed to do if you kick the bucket, Tucker?
Take care of fuss nuts.
I can do that.
Okay, so what was this secular day thing that you went to?
Oh, so Secular Day at the Capitol is run by the Secular Coalition of Arizona. And so we basically went to the Capitol, and they had speeches, and you get to do tours of the House and the Senate, and Then we have lunch, and there's a speaker at lunch. And then after that, there's a little bit of a march and a protest. And then you get to watch the House and the Senate vote on bills and things like that. So it was a really amazing day to sort of see my government in action, because we've all seen it on C-SPAN and we see the news articles afterwards, but it was great to be there and watch it happen. And then, so our tour guide was even more amazing and took us to watch the Republican and the Democratic caucuses as they voted for things that would go to committee. And then we caught the tail end of one of the committees. So I will talk about these things in the order of events in which they happen, because that's going to be easiest for me to remember. So I came in, I got to see the tour. And so the first thing we did was go to the House and the Senate floor, and there was no one there at the time because they didn't meet till after lunch. So that's then when we saw the Republican and the Democratic caucuses, and they each have screens going on, so you can see and read, not hear, what's going on in the other room. And so they share a wall, basically. It's like a little duplex. And so you can just walk around the hall to go from one room to the other, and they have a screen set up so you can know what's going on in the other room. And they're voting on things that go to committee, and they're voting on things that I hadn't, I know they've got to be in charge of these things, but I didn't realize it. So one of the things they voted on that I was there for, the Democrats voted on, was making changes to pharmacy technician licenses, training licenses, and how long the license was, and if it was renewable, and the qualifications and things like that. And so that was something they voted on. A guy really quickly rattled off what his proposal was, and they said, yeah, okay, let's send that to committee. And so in 30 seconds, a proposal was created that's going to go to committee, and if that's voted yay or nay, this could seriously impact someone's life. And it was a little 30-second thing. And so then they voted on a whole range of topics. One that made me happiest was, I guess there are state hospitals that have exit surveys. And so in the exit survey, it asks women about all of the things. And one of them was, fetal demise. And so the committee said, that's really not a necessary thing to ask a woman who's just dealt with the death of a baby. We don't need to then delve into the personal details of what happened. That's just not a thing the state really needs to know. It's not a statistic we're going to keep track of. And so we would like to have that removed from the survey. And they said, yeah, we're going to send that to committee. And so that made me happy. And it also, that was a thing I didn't even know was something that happened. I've never had kids, and I've never been in a state hospital. So after that, we then got to see one of the committees voting. And the thing that caught my attention the most is that it was supposed to be the transportation committee. But during their discussion, they brought up the library trustees board. And I don't understand how the transportation committee is in charge of the library trustees board. And if I was looking for something like that, I don't think it would even occur to me to go listen to the transportation committee discuss the board of trustees for the library. So that was something that made me a little icky. And the representative that walked us around said, well, sometimes it happens because other boards are full. They have a lot and they can't get through everything, so they stick it on the board that has the least amount of things. But that just seems like a bad way to handle it. So that was something. And then during lunch, we had this incredible speaker from ASU, and ASU is Arizona State University. And she came and spoke to us. She's a geneticist and evolutionary biologist. Her name was Melissa Wilson Sayers. And I'll put that in the show notes. And she was this incredibly well-spoken woman, and her field is, or her specific concentration in her field is sex-linked chromosomal disorders. And so she talked about the ways in which female or male presenting people can then have different chromosome pairs than we would imagine. So women are supposed to have two X's and men are X and a Y. And she said for 1 in 2,500 women, you've just got one X. And it's like, it's called Turner syndrome, I believe. And then for 1 in 50 men, you've got an extra X. And that was really fascinating to know.
Yeah.
And so during her speech, I'm just like fangirling because she's fucking amazing. And I love her to bits and pieces. A representative from another wealthy suburb here in Arizona sat down and just grumbled and mumbled and talked the whole time about how she's, just spouting a liberal agenda and poisoning people's thoughts. And he's eating the food that our organization has very kindly provided, and is mad as he sits at a table full of atheists that she is spouting this liberal agenda, as he calls it. And I wanted to throw my plate at him, but that's not nice. So after that, I missed a part. So as we're walking around the house floor, you can see people's desks. And I was horrified at the number of Bibles that were on people's desks. And we asked the representative, and he says that he thinks they're more just a distraction for people. Like, there's stuff on everyone's desk, but a lot of the people that have books on their desk just sort of flip through them and read them when they kind of don't want to pay attention to what's going on. And one of the people had a book on their desk called The Bible, America's Source for Law and Liberty. And when we looked him up, it turns out he's this asshole of a human being that wants to get rid of all ethnic studies classes, not only for K through 12, but in public and state universities too. He thinks they're divisive and create racism. So I don't like him.
Gee, I wonder why.
Right. So that was Secular Day at the Capitol, and I absolutely loved it, and I want to go back, and I want to, watch my government govern and just sort of be there as the process takes place. It was super, super cool. I loved it.
Yeah, that's good. I can't do anything like that, of course, because I don't have a car.
Right.
And my weird work schedule and the way they do things around here. They have they have Moral Mondays where a lot of people are going to the state capitol to protest as the legislators are walking in, to session to say, we're watching you, we know what you're doing, and we don't like what you're doing. Because everybody is on edge with the whole thing with Trump. But, Trump care has failed, so that is a good thing, although I'm sure they'll be back trying it again.
Yeah. The jerks. 7 years, Tucker, they've been bitching about this. 7 years. And when they should have a gate or a plan, they have nothing. Nothing.
No, of course not, because they're not interested in anything. You know, they had no purpose behind opposing it other than it just gave them a rallying point. There was no moral principle behind it. It was just, we object because we can. And so they didn't give any more thought to it, because why should they? You know, as long as it was there, they had, you know, something they could rally around. But if they actually came up with a solution, well, then they don't have the rally point anymore, and things have to move on.
I wonder what the next one's going to be. They haven't really hit abortion as hard as I thought they were. I feel like maybe that's next. Gay marriage, maybe?
Well, they kind of did hit abortion because they tried to defund Planned Parenthood.
Right, but I feel like they tried to defund Planned Parenthood, and I feel like they do a thing, and then they meet resistance, and they're like, all right, we're doing another thing. And then they meet resistance, and they're like, fuck it, we're doing another thing. And so I just wonder if they're going to come back and, like, really hammer on to something.
Well, I suspect that they're going to try and find, what they're trying to do is find something that they can just roll on with and use that to snowball into other things.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, so if they find an area where they can hit it and they gain victory, well, then they're, you know, they can latch on to something just weird, like what you were talking about with the libraries being attached to the transportation department, right?
Right.
That's probably how that happened. Was somebody was trying to get something through with the libraries or the transportation department, but couldn't, so they stuck the one to the other because they knew one of them would get through.
Right,
and
that makes sense.
So that's what they're just throwing everything they can at the wall to see where, you know, what will make it through and what won't. You know, and they're also hoping everybody will get burned out and just say, fuck it, I don't care anymore, just wreck everything. But we'll have to see. That is one of those things that you just never know.
I hope not. I hope it's only, what are we, March now? Holy shit, we're almost in April. I hope that people don't lose faith, lose hope, and then the government then is able to get things through because we've just sort of gotten complacent. We realize our government's fucked up, and we're just like, well, they haven't been able to pass anything too horrible. We have to keep fighting.
Yeah, we do. We do. The thing that concerns me is if we don't get a if we don't shift one of the houses of Congress before or in the midterms. If the houses, both houses of the Congress, remain in the hands of the Republicans, or the Republicans, you know, have, you know, or the Democrats have a narrow majority in one of the houses, then we're going to have lots of problems. But if we can get people to realize what's going on and have a massive shift in one or both houses of Congress in the midterms, then we should be able to ride things out for the rest of the time. It all just depends.
If people don't vote in the midterms, I'm burning this place to the ground.
Yeah.
We can't. I know no one votes in the primaries, right? But even after the primaries, when we saw how poorly people voted, I talked about, okay, we need to get people out there. We need to get people voting, right? Like, I talked about the incredibly low numbers. There's something like 50 million voting age Americans that are not registered to vote. Okay, guys, let's fucking get them registered to vote. There is someone standing outside my library every day of the week, all year round, trying to get people registered to vote. Every day. All year. Doesn't matter if it's an election year. Every day. There are, like, you've got time. Even if it's 5 minutes to make a Facebook post that you circulate every week. Tell someone how to get registered to vote. Fucking figure it out. We had the students in my lab, neither of them knew that you had to be registered for a party to vote in the primary.
Yeah.
And they discovered when they went to go try and register to vote. Like, everyone's on the internet. How, like, you can educate someone like that. And so it disturbs me that there is this outrage and blaming of, well, Hillary voters did this and Bernie voters did that. The independents fucked us over and yada, yada, yada. But how many people were really actually there, like, trying to get people to the polls? And, I mean, carpool service. I was willing to take the day off and drive people to voting polls. And everyone was like, oh, no, I'm fine. I'll make it there. And then 6 people on my friends list said, oh, I was so sad. I wasn't able to get there. Like, the bus stopped too late or yada, yada. I'm like, seriously, I've got a car. This city's not that big. We could have made it. And I told you weeks ago I would take the day off work to drive people to polling places. And that's if nothing else, that's a small thing I can do.
Yeah.
But I will be furious and burn this place to the ground if midterms come and people still aren't voting, and then there is the outrage the next day.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm fucking voting Republican just because I hate everyone. That's not true. I could never vote Republican. But I can't handle it anymore. It drives me absolutely crazy. I mean, how do you blame 500,000 total people who voted for independence when 120 million Americans didn't even vote?
Yeah. Yeah, and we need to stop pointing fingers at one another as well. It's your fault we did this. It's your fault this happened, that. No. Don't. It's
right. Like, we need to get our shit together. We need to get out there.
We can't change what has happened. We need to work on what we need to do going forward, and that is getting as many people as we can to work together in opposition to Trump and the Republicans.
Right.
Because it's not just the fact that, oh, well, things will be a little uncomfortable if this guy, gets to do whatever he wants. No, a whole lot of people could die.
Right. Absolutely. All right, so tell me about NanoCon. You and half of Tennessee hung out in a church together for like 4 days.
No, it was only one day.
Oh, okay.
And it was only 450 people. Or so. Probably more.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. It's surprising how many people there were. No, it was neat. It was not as fun as ReasonCon, but that's to be expected considering it's only, it's one day, and it's not like taking place at a hotel and things like that.
Right.
But it was still really enjoyable. I was surprised at who, that we all the people we had. There was the black non-believers were there.
I saw that.
Yes, and I did get you a T-shirt.
Yay!
They had hoodies, but I was like, no, probably not a good idea.
I sadly would never be able to wear it.
That's why I didn't get the hoodie. It's like, yeah, no, she probably would. And I'm sort of like, really? You guys are selling hoodies? Consider. Anyways.
So you said the black non-believers were there?
Yeah. And there was they were there, and they did a talk. I didn't get to go to it, unfortunately, about the documentary Black Exodus.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is about African Americans leaving the churches. And Mandisa, I don't remember her last name, but I sent you the picture of her.
Yep.
Who's the head of that? She was there, and she gave a talk. I caught part of that. She's a good speaker. She was a good speaker. What I caught of her speech. I'm trying to think what else. The biggest fun with all those things is just being able to hang out with people.
Right.
The talks and the conferences and stuff like that are nice, but just being able to hang out with people that share your own views and stuff like that is really cool. Got to meet a whole bunch of people from the members only lounge.
That's cool.
Yeah. Got to meet Callie from there. And, and of course I picked up a case of the con crud.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah. But, no, I always say, if you're near one of those things, go to it. I mean, I know you go to the Satanic Temple things, but have you ever been to anything like that?
No, and sadly, all the stuff this year is on a weekend that I'm doing other things. But it now looks like ReasonCon's going to be a yearly thing, so I plan on going next year.
Ooh, goody.
Because the first one was like 10 years ago, right? And then they didn't do another one for a real long time.
No, the first one was in, I think, it was 2014. Yeah, the first one was 2014. They did one the next year in 2015. That was the one I went to. And then they didn't do one last year because reasons.
Okay.
I think they thought they were going to get overshadowed by the Reason Rally, and that didn't happen. And so they're doing it this year.
Maybe that's the thing that I'm thinking doesn't happen.
Yeah. Reason Rally happens every 4 years.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if they'll do it. I would suspect they'll do it in 2020, just because, hopefully everybody has realized that apathy fucked us hard in 2016.
Yes.
So that's what we need to do. But yeah, no, if you can go to any of those, it's like Woodstock.
Okay, I'll go. We'll all hang out together. I'll try not to be drunk and loud the whole time. I promise not to be drunk the whole time. I cannot make promises about not being loud. That would not happen.
I wouldn't complain either way.
Yay!
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fosnuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.